Good morning, 7th grade. This is Tuesday, March the 31st, and this is your language lesson for today. Lesson 8 was due for today, so make sure you're finished with 8 before you look at this video, because we'll go over some of the answers. Please work at doing your lessons accurately and then checking your work, make corrections. So we'll look at a few things in Lesson 8, and then we will look at Lesson 9. Lesson 9 is due for tomorrow. I will tell you right now that there will be a few from Lesson 9 that I will grade, that I will put on your report card, so follow the instructions on that, okay? Just do Lesson 9 accurately. Tomorrow when we grade it, I will tell you which ones need to be graded, which ones need to be recorded for the grade. All right, let's look at Lesson 8. Page 28, you can turn to. We have looked at compound sentences. A compound sentence is two or more independent clauses connected with either a comma and conjunction or a semicolon. All right, we have looked at complex sentences. A complex sentence is one independent clause with one or more dependent clauses. And again, the dependent clauses are introduced with your relative pronouns or subordinating conjunctions. In today's lesson, we are looking at a third option, a compound complex sentence. A sentence that could be compound and complex, which means you have your at least two independent clauses connected with your conjunction or semicolon, and within one or both of those independent clauses, you may have dependent clauses, okay? And it gives you examples. Look at the example on the top of page 28. The third example, a compound complex sentence. Two or more independent clauses with at least one independent clause. Although the aspirin was concocted by Charles Gerhardt, Felix Hoffmann discovered its usefulness 40 years later. He was searching for a pain reliever for his arthritic father. So although you recognize, hopefully, as a subordinated conjunction. So you have, although aspirin was originally concocted by Charles Gerhardt, that's your dependent clause. And then you have Felix Hoffmann discovered its usefulness 40 years later, an independent clause, semicolon, he was searching for a pain reliever for his arthritic father. So let's grade some of these, look at the instructions. Number 5. This is a compound complex sentence. So it is compound, and it also has, in one of the independent clauses, or maybe both, it has dependent clauses. Number 5, you're supposed to underline the independent clauses. So number 5, you should have underlined, scientists were trying to make a synthetic rubber. Do you see any relative pronouns or subordinating conjunction in that clause? No, I don't see any. Then you're supposed to circle the connecting words. So between the two independent clauses, circle either a conjunction or the semicolon. You have a comma and a conjunction that you could circle here. So circle the comma and the word but. And then you have another independent clause, underlined. They came up with a gooey material, underlined. And then you have the relative pronoun, that we call silly putty. That we call silly putty in brackets. So you have a compound sentence, two independent clauses. Scientists were trying to make a synthetic rubber. Another independent clause, they came up with a gooey material. And then the dependent clause, that we call silly putty. So that is a compound, that's what a compound complex sentence may look like. 7 through 11, you are supposed to bracket dependent clauses, underline independent clauses, and then identify the sentence as either simply compound, or just complex, or combination compound complex. So number 7. Paper towels came into existence when a toilet paper company received a shipment of extremely heavy tissue paper. All right, so what do we have? Compound sentence, complex sentence, or combination of the two? What's your independent clause? Or maybe easier to find the dependent clause first, if there is one. The main idea of this sentence is that paper towels came into existence. That's underlined. That's the independent clause. And then you have the word when a toilet paper company received a shipment of extremely heavy tissue paper. Make sure you have the entire dependent clause bracketed. That entire thing is a dependent clause. So what kind of sentence is this? Compound, complex, or compound, complex? I just see one independent clause and a dependent clause, so it is simply number 7, complex, CX. Number 9. Blaise Pascal invented the first calculator in 1642. But, there's a clue there, conjunction, comma, but it was far different from those that we use today. So that is a clue that this is probably a compound sentence. And we have an independent clause. Blaise Pascal invented the first calculator in 1642. That should be underlined. Then you have your comma and your conjunction. And then, what do we have in the next part of the sentence? It was far different from those that we use today. It was far different from those, underlined. And in brackets, relative pronoun there, the adjective clause, that we use today. So you have here a compound and a complex sentence, CDCX. Number 11 is simply complex, CX in the blank. Dr. William Halstead invented rubber gloves for a nurse. That's underlined. Adjective clause in brackets, who suffered from rashes on her hands. All right? Then right after that you have the definition, or what makes up a compound sentence. 2 or more independent clauses. Complex, one independent with 1 or more dependent clauses. Compound, complex, 2 or more independent clauses, and at least 1 dependent clause. Let's look at number 15. 15. Some of you were, we'll talk about the quizzes here just a little bit as we go, as we run into things that you may have had problems with. The passive active voice, all right? Passive active. Active voice is when the subject of the sentence is actually doing the action, all right? In passive voice, it is not the subject that's doing it. Passive voice will have a past form of a helping verb with the past verb. So in number 15, this is passive. The winning poster was designed by Christina Brooks. That's passive. Poster's the subject. The poster's not doing any designing. Okay? Poster was designed, but the poster's not doing any action. So make this, rewrite number 15, think about it, so that it is active. So that the same thing is happening, but you have the subject doing the action. So to write this passive one into active, you take the object of the preposition, Christina Brooks, make that the subject. Christina Brooks designed the winning poster. The subject poster becomes a direct object. Christina Brooks designed the winning poster. That is active. Number 17. Underline the gerund phrase and circle the gerund. Label the function of each. One problem that a number of you had in your quiz with this section of gerund phrases was you did not underline, you did not include the entire phrase. Okay, a gerund phrase will have adjectives, direct objects, prepositional phrases with it. So please make sure you have the entire gerund phrase. Remember, a gerund is a verb form that functions as a noun. It always ends with ing. So number 17, James's employer commended James for working faithfully for 25 years. Well, the only ing word is working. So that's going to be your gerund. And what is the phrase? Is it just working faithfully, or is it working faithfully for 25 years? Include that entire phrase, working faithfully for 25 years, underline, working circled, and what's the function of working? Or what's the function of this phrase? It is an object of the preposition. For working, object of the preposition. Number 19. Is a compound sentence. Only God can give life, comma, and only God, subject, has, verb, the right to end it. All right, now, lesson 9, of course, you figured this would come up, right? Diagramming. Diagramming compound complex sentences. Now, most of these diagrams are given for you, all right? Most of the diagrams are given for you, so that will be very helpful. I would recommend, let's look at number 4. Okay, you know how to diagram compound sentences. Okay, you diagram the first independent clause, then you have your dotted line, straight line, dotted line with the conjunction or semicolon on there, okay? And then you diagram the second independent clause. Well, the only thing that we're adding here is that there might be some dependent clauses. There will be dependent clauses. And you also know how to diagram dependent clauses. Now, what I would recommend, look at number 4, page 33, lesson 9, number 4. We're going to do this one. I have it on the board. Hopefully you can see it all. Pretty much fills the board up. What I want you to do, first of all, is look at number 4 and underline all the subjects once. Maybe you should find the dependent clause. Okay? We know there's a dependent clause because you have that slanted dotted line connected to another sentence there or another clause. So that's going to be your dependent clause. So where is your dependent clause? Put brackets around the dependent clause. So find either the subordinated conjunction or the relative pronoun. Although aspirin, there it is, although. So this gets bracketed. Although aspirin was originally concocted by Charles Gerhardt. Brackets. Now in those brackets, what is the subject? What is the subject and what is the verb in that dependent clause? Right, you see it? Underline the subject once, the verb twice. Okay, do this before you see this diagram. So underline the subject once, the verbs twice, verb or verbs twice. Put any prepositional phrases in parentheses, right? And then you can label the rest of the words if you want to. Although would be a subordinated conjunction, you can put that SC on there. Originally is an adverb. All right? Then we have the first part of the compound sentence, the top line. Felix Hoffman discovered its usefulness. And the way that the diagram is, you have a subject, a verb, a direct object, and an adjective describing the direct object. So figure out subject, verb, direct object, and what goes with the object in that part. Felix Hoffman discovered its usefulness. And then the very bottom part is the second part, is another independent clause, second part of the compound sentence. He was searching for a pain reliever. Again, underline the subject once, verb twice, maybe put parentheses around prepositional phrases. It seems like there's a prepositional phrase there, right? I would recommend that you do this in these sentences. In the odd numbers that you're doing, 1, 3, and 5. 5, the diagram's not there. Figure it out. Okay? Find the subject, find the verb, find the dependent clauses, prepositional phrases, anything like that. Make sure that you include everything in number 5. Okay? Come up with that diagram. Please, please do it carefully. And I would recommend, again, bracket dependent clauses, parentheses around prepositional phrases, underline subjects once, verbs twice, label the other words, whatever you can do to be helpful there in coming up with your diagram. But I imagine that that diagram will look like most of the rest of these. Probably have it's a compound sentence, probably has a dependent clause in, compound complex. So check that out. Do number 5 carefully, because I would guess that if we're going to grade anything, we're for sure going to grade 5, all right? Sorry, I know. We'll grade it. We'll look at the others too. So don't skip any of them, 1, 3, and 5. All right, here's the diagram for number 4. Where's my stick? I have everything. Just check it out a little bit. Different colors for everything. So hopefully you can see what's going on. All right? So here you have a compound sentence. Here's the first part of the compound sentence, an independent clause. And then here you have your dotted line, straight line that has your either conjunction or semicolon in this case on it. Make sure you don't miss any of this. Joined to the verb of the second independent clause. Okay, so both of these are independent clauses. All right? Felix Hoffman discovered its usefulness. Direct object usefulness. What was discovered? Usefulness. Its. All right? Connected to the second independent clause, semicolon on here, he was searching, prepositional phrase, for a pain reliever. All right? And then you simply put your dependent clause, subordinating conjunction. Remember, this is an adverb clause with a subordinating conjunction that always goes from verb to verb. Okay, verb to verb with the subordinated conjunction on the dotted line. If it is an adjective phrase, the relative pronoun in an adjective phrase that gets connected, a dotted line from the noun that it modifies, okay? The noun that comes right before the adjective phrase, nothing goes on the dotted line then, if it has a relative pronoun. And often the relative pronoun is the subject of the dependent clause. In this case, we have the subordinating conjunction, although aspirin was concocted originally when adverb by Charles Gerhardt. Okay, was concocted by who? By Charles Gerhardt. It looks difficult, it looks complicated, okay? But you know, don't let it get in your head. That's the biggest thing here. You look at this thing and you're like, where do I start? Okay? But you know how to diagram independent clauses. Okay? Felix Hoffman discovered usefulness. Here's another one. Compound sentence gets connected like that. He was searching. All right? And then you have your subordinating conjunction, verb to verb. Aspirin was concocted by Charles Gerhardt originally. All right? So that looks like that. Please do lesson 9, the odds for tomorrow. And there will be some of those that are graded. So do the lesson carefully. Thank you very much.